So tell me a little bit about your story.
Okay, well, I have a Bachelor of Science, and I'm also a DDS, a Doctor of Dental Surgery, and I lived in Texas, and I had a big practice. It was very successful, and I started going through a little bit of a rough time. I got in a relationship that had gone sour, and I'll never forget I decided to file for divorce. The divorce attorney that my ex had hired was rather aggressive and had made it some false statements about me, and I just couldn't believe that all of this was happening. It was kind of a nightmare. And I wasn't familiar with family law and the way the game was played, and I kind of went into a little bit of funk, okay? I wasn't coping with it very well, you know, because all of a sudden I was overwhelmed. My means to support myself and my family had sort of dissipated, and and now all of a sudden there were all of these, this dirty game that was being played in family law. I was at the, being attacked, and I just was having a hard time contending with it. And so I started to get sicker, and I decided, well, you know, I better do something about it. And I didn't really have very many tools for coping with the situation, and one of the things I was doing was drinking in the evenings to kind of calm my nerves, and I decided, well, you know, maybe I better take a look at that, you know. So I checked myself into a hospital. I was dehydrated and sick, and they were, you know, asking me why I was there, and I said, well, you know, I'm dehydrated and I'm sick, and they said, well, you know, what precipitated it? And I said, well, you know, I've just going through this bitter divorce, and they called the doctor in, and he said, well, you know, how do you feel about this? And are you depressed? And I said, well, yeah, I'm a little bit depressed about it. And he said, well, you know, are you generally happy? And I said, yeah, I'm generally happy, you know. And do you have any problems sleeping at night? And I said, well, you know, it's been a little bit stressful, and sometimes I do. And he said, well, you know what, I'm going to commit you. And I said, what do you mean commit me? And he said, well, I'm going to commit you to the hospital. This is there's a psych hospital downstairs, and I'm going to commit you to that. And I said, well, I don't understand. And he said, well, you have a choice. You can either, one, go freely as a voluntary commitment, or I'm going to get a court order. And I was just like, what the heck, you know? And so I was thinking, gee whiz, man, I'm caught in the middle of a custody battle. I better, you know, go ahead and do a voluntary commitment, because I didn't really know what it was. I didn't have any idea what a commitment was or anything like that. So the next thing you know, I'm downstairs, and he's asking me all these questions about what kind of quote, symptoms I had. And he said, well, you know, it's just going to be 10 days. And I said, okay, well, you know, I don't really have any choice here. So the next thing you know, they put me on Mellaril, which was a very heavy drug that was used for, my understanding, was used for schizophrenia. And I didn't take that very well. It didn't happen. I mean, I didn't respond to it very well. I started having side effects. And so they put me on a medication to counter-effect the side effects, which was atropine, I believe. And I started having side effects to that, so they put me on another medication to counter-effect the side effects of the primary medication and the secondary medication, which was Benadryl. And by that time, I was kind of like wiped out. So then they said, okay, well, we're going to try Risperidol. So they put me on Risperidol, and I didn't respond well to that. and this was like 2 days later or so, and they put me on a medication to counteract the side effects, and then they put me on another medication to counteract the side effects of that medication. And I didn't do well, and so they put me on another medication instead of that one, which was Haldol. And I didn't respond well to that, so they put me on a medication to counteract the side effects, and then another medication to counteract the side effects. And by that time, I was, kind of just like out of it, and my insurance had ran out, and all of a sudden, I was free to go. So. The other thing is that they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder, okay, which was manic depression. At that time, it was now called bipolar disorder. So now I've got this label, okay, because once you're diagnosed with bipolar disorder, you're branded. It's because they consider it to be a genetic illness. Okay, they've even, quote, isolated the gene for bipolar disorder, unquote, okay? And I wasn't able to practice because, to some degree, I kind of bought into it. I thought, well, maybe, he knows something that I don't know, okay? That I'm responding to these life stressors in a untoward fashion, and that maybe I should be handling them better, and that maybe I do have some sort of an illness, that doesn't allow me to respond correctly to these normal stressors in life, And so they put me on another medication. I think it was Depakote, and I went into a coma. I remember it was on Christmas Eve, and I woke up in the hospital, and it was like a 24-hour deal. And so the disability started kicking in, and I started receiving disability payments. But by that time, I was no longer able to practice, okay? So now I'm sort of locked into this disability program because I had to sell my practice, okay, and retire my license as a consequence of the medications that they had given me and the treatment that I was receiving for the problems that I had, and which were basically going through a divorce and having my practice burned down and the threat of losing my kids and my whole life sort of crumbling in front of me. Everything I'd built for together, I mean, it was falling away from me. And later on, I remember I was down at the Bay House, and I started having chest pain, and I collapsed. And they came and got me in a hospital, and they took me to a regular hospital. And apparently, unbeknownst to me, a psychiatrist, because I had this label of bipolar disorder, routinely prescribed a psych medication, even though I had chest pain. And they gave me what turned out to be Haldol. I didn't know at the time. And I went into a coma. And I was on full life support for 2 weeks. And when I came out of the coma, I didn't know where I was. I was delusional to some degree or another. But I finally, reoriented myself. But I was paralyzed from the waist down, and entirely, completely paralyzed. And it took me, about a month before I could get some of my feeling back. It took me the better part of 2 years to learn how to walk again. I lost a good part of the skin on my hands and feet and arms. I lost my hair. Huge chunks of my hair was falling out. I had pneumonia, chronic pneumonia for a long period of time, and I was taking antibiotics, and I ended up with systemic fungal infections, which was a supra infection from the long-term antibiotics, and I had more hair loss and splotches of all over my body, and but that coma changed my life. All it takes is one good near-death experience to, shift your viewpoint. And somehow or another, I had another awareness, a higher awareness afterwards. And I started questioning this whole road that I had been down, this nightmare of try this pill and that pill and this pill, never ever really receiving any kind of counseling on the actual life problems that were causing my stress. And part of the reason that the complications that I was having were from, in the first place, were from, drinking and caffeine and just the normal stresses of going through a troublesome period in life, and I didn't have the tools or the skills to be able to confront it, the coping. So my coping mechanisms were the alcohol and the caffeine, and just kind of grin and bear it, and I went into an overwhelm. And then, the psychiatrist comes and takes normal, everyday symptoms of living, such as happiness, and one of the, if you look at the symptoms of bipolar disorder, you get happy, do you get depressed, do you get anxious, do you have problems sleeping? I mean, I don't know of anybody that doesn't have those issues at some point in time or another, particularly when they're under stress. So rather than actually treating the problem, the cause of the stress, which was the divorce and getting that handled and getting the practice going again and getting back on my feet and not coping with any kind of alcohol or caffeine or anything like that, but just, living a healthy life, they take those symptoms and turn them into an illness, okay? A mental illness, and then treat it with a medication. So it really kind of ends up being a perfect scam, because you've got somebody that's got a real problem, they diagnose it as being a mental illness, they give you a medication which makes the symptoms worse, which we call iatrogenic. And iatrogenic means caused by the doctor. So I got some life coaching, and I got off all the medications, and I started doing really well. And as a matter of fact, I started doing fine, and I didn't have any more symptoms. I was trying to find out what the hell was wrong with me, okay? Why this was happening and what was happening. And ultimately, I did find out what was going on. And when I did, I started moving towards my own freedom. But it had nothing to do with any kind of treatment, drug treatment. It's like, okay, here's the problem over here. The guy's having a divorce, okay, and it's unfortunate, and he's caused, to some degree or another, I've caused a lot of my problems here, and now I need to get myself out of it. I need to look and see, you know, what I've done here and handle it and get on with the show, okay? But to say that it's a mental illness, you know, the normal course of living and the problems that we have and the manifestations of life all of a sudden become, quote, symptoms which are treatable with a drug. Okay, now that doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. It never worked for me. I haven't seen it work for anybody. I confronted, you know, the beast that I had created, you know, instead of running away, you know, accepting some sort of a diagnosis as an answer to the reason why I got into these problems. And I'm proud of that. You know, I'm very proud that I was able to walk out of that dead-end system of what amounts to abuse. Okay, it's abuse by psychiatry in the name of healing. And for that matter, it irks me because being a dentist, you know, one of the things that I tried to do was to help cure people and treat people and to make them better. But in psychiatry, to earn an MD, okay, and then force drugs on people so that they can collect insurance benefits is wrong. And they're sacrificing the integrity and the well-being of not only the people that they treat, but their entire profession. And I hope that you're listening. If you have children, or if you have family members, or if you yourself are caught up in this system, there's a way out. You can get out of it. It's not what they say it is. It's not real. What they're telling you is a lie. The diagnosis and the treatment is a lie. And there's a way out. So there's hope, and I'm a shining example. I feel very fortunate to have been given the opportunity to rise above the lie and confront life for what it is, and be able to accept it and be happy with it. That's it.